Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Stock, CEO at SalesMD. We're a consulting and training company focused on helping medical practices convert leads into patients. I'd like to welcome Kary Smith, managing partner at TouchMD. Kary has led the business for over 10 years. TouchMD is a visual consultation, marketing and imaging software system that utilizes touchscreen, iPad and smartphone technology to enhance the patient experience and increase practice revenue. So it's a privilege for me and an honor to have the opportunity to interview you, Kary. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here today and have an opportunity to share some thoughts. So thank you.
Thank you. And I know it's a crazy time, so let's just jump in. What have the last few weeks, what have the last few weeks for you been like?
Well, gosh, I want to say, maybe 5 or 6 weeks. I believe it's been a little bit scary. We, from a morale standpoint, just throughout the organization, we have nearly 52 employees. So there's a mixed bag of those that are at risk and high risk and those that aren't. And so that's been a little bit interesting. Another thing that's, a little fundamental change is all the trade shows have been canceled. So when you look at what does that do to your company from a revenue standpoint and with your sales team, and the same thing really has happened with in-office demos, with the practices primarily being closed. So it's just been a little bit different navigation. I feel like there have been some peaks and valleys, for us as a company through this time.
I tell you, I've often described it as a roller coaster.
Yeah.
As you look at those, you've got people potentially at risk. What's that like for you?
Well, I believe in people. First of all, I think that's the number one asset any company has, and I know there are different companies that look at things differently, but that's one of the main focuses that we have here. The nice thing about TouchMD is we really can be a totally remote company. Everything's cloud-based. Nobody would have to come into the office if they didn't want to. We have a number of employees that work remotely, and we have meetings here at our company headquarters. But with that being said, even through this pandemic time, we've left our company office open because we haven't been mandated to shut. So our leadership team and those that have wanted to be associated and come to work have been able to do that. And those that didn't want to stay home, we respected that. Everybody's becoming proficient at the virtual meeting. So that's been a plus. But I will say, I think from a morale standpoint, being here for those that have wanted to and having some normalcy with their day has been a plus. And, during this time, I think there's been a change, a little bit, not a change in our culture, but a little bit of a change in energy and focus that's taken place as everybody really has said, how are we going to move forward and progress?
Fantastic. And I love that sort of that realization in terms of the sort of a tweak, as you say, to the culture and how that's sort of evolving and developing. What's the biggest challenge you have as a leader right now?
Well, I think the biggest challenges that obviously most companies are probably dealing with is number one is cash and how to handle cash and hold cash and, protect the cash so that you can make it through this time. The other part is projecting revenue and what that can look like or should look like over the next, 60 days, 180 days and beyond. So those are two exercises from my level that have taken place that we've been working on. And then, we hit on it a couple of times, but really morale. Morale and culture and making sure everybody's feeling connected and safe and a part of, what our message is and what we're presenting to the market, and a collective effort. So those would be the things that I would say have been our challenges.
No, it makes a lot of sense. Sort of, that sort of the old adage, cash is king.
Yeah.
and sort of, as you say, what's going out, what's coming in, and what's actually in the bank. And yeah, what specifically, so let's change the focus a little bit now onto your customers. What specifically is TouchMD doing to support practices during this crisis?
Well, it's interesting. We've always been known as the virtual consultation tool, or the ultimate consultation tool, I should say, to have that superior experience when you're one-on-one with the practitioner, the educational value that you get with a TouchMD consultation versus, other types of consultations they're having in the aesthetic space. Doctors for a long time have been using TouchMD, and we've built the technology around being able to do a consultation with someone that's living out of the country or out of the area that could potentially share their images. The doctor can bring them up. They can have some communication about them. So once this happened, we really understood a huge pain point that practices were having with, what am I going to do now? How am I going to keep these consultations I have on the books now that this pandemic has happened? And so we really, I don't want to say we pivoted, because we didn't. We already had this available. But we refocused our energy around the virtual consultation. And the thing that's valuable for us is we're not the communication platform. We either work with Zoom or GoToMeeting or Doxy or whatever the practice's medium is for this face-to-face communication. But once they're able to share their screen, a doctor can provide all the elements that they have in the office virtually, which makes it totally different than having a FaceTime conversation and not being able to educate that patient during that virtual consultation process. So that's been a huge win for our company and a huge win for our current TouchMD clients. Now, along with that, because we felt like this was such a huge pain point for the market, we've never done this before, but we offered a 60-day free trial of TouchMD during this time frame. So practices could get our technology, they could get up and running, and they could use it to help with their virtual consultations so that they could, present some of those things they're used to doing in office in a virtual way. And in addition to that, we came up with our most aggressive pricing that we've had to date to help offset some of the loss that practices are having being closed, and still making it viable for them to purchase our technology and implement it maybe during this time that they have a little more downtime and the ability to integrate it with their practices. So aggressive pricing, the 60-day trial. And then the other thing that we've done is we've done a lot of practice check-ins through our account management team, just to make sure practices are okay and they're doing all right. We're understanding when they're reopening. And then we're offering any additional trainings that they may want to take advantage of during this downtime that they have.
Wow. So busy times.
You know what? It's funny. Some of our, most of our people are saying we're more busy now than we were prior to, because of this focus and the energy we're putting around helping practices succeed.
I love it. I've seen, that your software, the TouchMD software, in use within the practice, and I love how you're sort of taking that, to that virtual consult stage, which is just a natural extension of what you guys are fantastic at doing anyway. But a little question there. So if you're, 60-day trial, aggressive pricing, if you're new to TouchMD, presumably go to the website, reach out, any sort of specific advice in terms of how to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so it's all on the website. So they can go to the website, request the 90-day or 60-day trial, and they'll be plugged in.
Fantastic.
Our account specialist team. It's been really interesting. We've had practices that were shut down on the West Coast and the East Coast that just implemented this virtual consultation. I had one one of the practices commented to me lately, just recently, and he said, look at what you're doing for my practice during this downtime. And he said, what are all these other companies doing for me? And he just was raving about the ability. He's busy with consultations 5 days a week virtually with nobody coming into the practice. And then he's future scheduling those patients when he's seeing this lifting 30 to 45 days out, but he's establishing that revenue path for his practice once he comes out. We had one group that, just on a check-in, we're talking about these check-ins, that said, hey, we don't know what we're going to do. And our account manager suggested the virtual consultation. And the office manager wife actually started crying and just said, you saved our practice. And so I know some of these practices run really cash tight, and everybody runs their business differently. So those kind of confirmations have just been, gratifying for everybody in our company.
I think it's fantastic. And, as you know what I do, I look at it through the lens in terms of sort of that sales process, the consultation process. And I think sometimes it's these crises that sort of allow us to start working and operating in different ways, which actually is going to be far more efficient. If we do a sort of a pre-consult or, 50, 60% of the consult remotely, you're going to see far more patients or potential patients. And then, in my language, you're qualifying the right patients for you and for them.
Right.
And it becomes a far more efficient process.
I totally agree with what you're saying. And I think there's going to be a very significant behavioral shift that happens, that takes place with what our learnings as a society right now. It's not just virtual consultations, virtual work. The government agencies are determining that this is much better. And this idea of making a patient drive 3 hours round trip for a follow-up when that could be done through a virtual process is something that's going to stay. And I think you have identified just through the sales process, not only to use the word screening, but just making sure it's the correct fit for the practice and the patient, and being able to do that as part of their process is going to be huge. It's more time efficient, and it's a cost savings to the practice and a revenue opportunity.
Yeah, I totally agree. Other than recommending TouchMD, which, as we talk through, clearly becomes a no-brainer, what other advice are you sharing with your customers at the moment?
Well, obviously we're telling them to continue to consult. We think that that's a big piece. I also believe that the practices that seem to be forging forward out of this are continuing to communicate with their patients. And that's done in a number of different ways: phone calls, emails, social media, but there's some type of communication mechanism. Not that, hey, we're planning on being closed, but how are you? This is what we're doing. These are our services. Let's re-engage. And they're using this as a positive time to communicate with patients in whatever forms they can, which I think is great, because as we come out of this, I know there's going to be, and we poll a lot of practices. We know pretty much every area in the United States when they're planning on reopening and their dates and all those kind of things. But as we poll them, they're really seeing this pinned up demand that's happening because patients are at home, they've missed some treatments, and they want to get back on the books. So coming out of this on reopening, practices may want to ease into it just because of the social impact, but they're going to have the opportunity to see quite a few patients coming out of this. So we see that. We've also talked to them about improving their business processes, not just the processes that we talk about, but rather than sitting on this spare time they have, some trainings for their staff, all those kind of things is kind of what we're suggesting to practices.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's huge opportunities. by being proactive, in the practice and sort of working that through. I think social media and all of those ways in terms of communicating with patients is critical. I also think the phone call. I think it'd be a great opportunity just to sort of phone every single client. And for me, it's not about selling. It's just about connecting and just saying, hey, we're here. This is our plans. This is what we're doing. And just sort of, just checking in and making sure they're okay. Pretty much like you sort of said earlier on in terms of your account managers and phoning your customers. I think that we just need to be continually doing that and just going through that. What else, as practices start to see the easing and we're sort of hearing that start to be spoken about, what should they be doing in terms of getting ready for a reopening as such?
Well, we've touched on a few things. So my feeling is that each practice should be perfecting the virtual consultation process because of this behavioral change. I know it's going to be something that stays. The virtual follow-up, all these things should be something that a practice is contemplating how they are going to succeed in these various areas. The behavioral change, I hear that over and over and over again. One of the practices that I talked to said, we'll never see the 40 patients a day again. We may see 10, we may see 15, but the rest of it needs to happen in these virtual ways. It's better for the patient. It's easier on the practice. This is something that is a learning that I'm hearing not just insignificantly, but significantly. So I think coming out of this, they need to understand that their peers are going to be doing this, and how are they going to compete with other practices and what they offer from a virtual standpoint, as well as what's going to happen when patients come through the door. You're a sales guru, and so that there's so many things from the call to the check-in to the exam room. What part of that will be done remotely? What part will be done in the practice? But everybody needs to change their thinking right now about what that's going to be moving forward in the future. We feel fortunate from the standpoint that TouchMD with its virtual consultation really offers the best of both worlds. I doubt we'll be that, we have the ability to develop the communication piece, the two-way communication piece, but you'll see from what's happened, there'll be consolidation and there's going to be a lot of things that happen on that piece of software. So the fact that we stay independent of that, we don't care what a practice loves. If they love Zoom, they use that. If they love GoToMeeting, they use that, Doxy, UpDocs, whatever their thing is that they like or prefer, we just plug into that. And as far as being a company that offers this educational superior consultation process, we're the only ones that we know of in the aesthetic space other than a company that would require you to change your EHR. And then, of course, we integrate with 26 different EHRs, so we don't have to, you can plug our technology in. So I don't know what will come in the future, as far as competition with that. But right now, we feel fortunate that we're the only company that appears to be offering that in the space.
I think you're making some, hugely significant points, and too many for me to summarize in one go, including the very nice compliment. So thank you for that. So you've been managing partner. I'm changing back to a little bit about you. You've been the managing partner now for 10 years. So that doesn't happen by chance. And I'd just like to sort of think about it from a leadership point of view. I'm sure you've had great mentors and coaches over the years. So what's the one lesson you've learned or piece of advice you've been given that really stands out for you?
Well, I was taught as a child by my parents, first of all, that respecting people is really what matters. And then each of the mentors that I've had along the way really have reinforced this idea that people matter. Products, there's a lot of products, but your success in your organization is going to be dependent on the type of people that you bring in, the cultural fit, and then the way you treat those people over time. You know, I'm really proud to say that our company, you know, we have great values and ethics, no doubt, but our environment is more like a family. You know, everybody matters. Sometimes we disagree, but at the end of the day, we're all working for a common goal, and everybody gets on board with that. So I think primarily that's probably the thing that stands out to me the most. I mean, I've had mentors that have, you know, taught me channel, you know, how to work the channel, you know, different business aspects. But when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, what you take away from it, and this, much of the gratification that you get from running your business is your customers, the relationships you have with your customers, even your vendors, you know, the relationships you have there, and then those that you work with on a day-to-day basis. So if I were to say anything, I would just say work on perfecting and reinforcing those relationships up and down your organization.
I love it. For me, it's all about the relationship. You know, and you're right. You need to learn sort of strategies and tactics, channel management, all of those things. But you know, the relationship for me is absolutely key and core to why we do all of this. So, conscious of time. So to wrap up, what are your final thoughts or reflections you'd like to sort of share at this stage?
Oh, geez. So this is kind of funny. When we did our SWOT analysis at the first of the year and we were evaluating threats, the management team did theirs, and then each one of the auxiliary teams did theirs. The support team did their SWOT analysis, the dev team, the sales team, and 2 out of the other 3 teams really came up with this idea of a recession. And I, you know, from the management standpoint, that really didn't hit the radar. And so we were pretty much thinking that 2019 was great, 2020 is going to be better, you know, this is how we're going to get to our goals. And then this idea of a recession, I don't think anybody saw the pandemic coming. However, it did cause us to reflect a little bit. And I don't know if mainly our groups were feeling that cyclical, you know, thing that happens, you know, it seems like every 8 years. But we took a few precautions. So my final thoughts are, we're going to come out of this. It's going to be great. We're going to be better than ever. I think the market is going to rebound. I would be shocked to see if the aesthetic industry is actually less than it was in 2019. I think it'll forge past 2019 in product sales. But at the same time, I guess the idea of planning for a rainy day is something that the pandemic is really, you know, tried to make us all aware of. I know the PPP program by the government and some of the other initiatives are helping out, but there needs to be a little bit of a cash nest egg moving forward, because you never know.
I think there's a lot of positivity there to end on. So I think that's a great place. So again, thank you so much for being so gracious with your time today. I think you provided such amazing insight, so it's really appreciated. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Chris. It's been a pleasure. And thank you.